All right, guys, welcome back to D'Angelo Unfiltered, or as we'll now call the channel, Letters by D'Angelo. I came up with this idea this week as a way for me to not only be intentional about the message you're about to hear today, but also to honor my ability to write. And I'll be sharing my letters about the world to you, insights from the pen to the mic. So these words are not ad libbed, but they are embodied. And I wrote this particular letter because I want you to be able to look for all aspects of reality. I believe this will help you understand the universe more. And we're going to talk about freedom today, but from a lens that you might not expect. This letter is about what leads to true freedom, and it requires some depth, so stay with me. Polarity is the key word, and polarity is how reality becomes visible to us, while division is how we become controllable. Something that is very obvious about our world is that it can be very comforting to pick a side or a tribe to connect with on shared ideals. We may view the world the same, or we may be looking for similar outcomes. This can create a sense of ease with the group or thing we associate with. And life is about usually generating greater comfort and optimization. So we often find ourselves running towards these types of connections. It's much easier to deal with the messy universe when you can divide the world into pockets for people to identify with. Everything becomes a little less complex when you can say these people are definitively right and these other people are definitively misguided. I could ignore this type of thinking if it didn't completely misrepresent the true nature of reality, which is extremely messy, chaotic, complex, and gray. The two colors that make gray are black and white. I want you to think about why there are thousands of religions, but so many people say this one is the truth. Why are there so many political parties and ideologies, yet we only give credence to red and blue? Why do we say that men are one way and women are another, when in fact all humans have masculine and feminine qualities within themselves that make them unique? Everything is intertwined and interdependent, and truth is relative to one's own position and consciousness in life. Oftentimes, we get what we look for. Our perspective often changes what comes back through our eyes. Yet, our preferences in life can't change what's actually happening in reality. But our minds love the either or stance of decision making and meaning making. And it is true that worrying only about two aspects of reality is much easier than dealing with 10 or 20. The brain can only hold so much complexity at one time. So we love yes or no. We love knowing who we are and where we belong in the world. This is to say that polarity is seductive. It draws us in because we have this need to be liked and loved by someone outside of ourselves. We are social animals who need connection and belonging to stay in balance. Yet it's also what leads us astray, and I'll tell you why from a larger lens. Ultimately, the universe speaks in pairs. If you really open your eyes, you'll find that the universe is full of natural polarity. They say that the universe speaks in pairs, so polarity is built into reality and it tricks us because everything in the universe is contrasted. You have males and females, yin and yang energy, black and white, lightness and darkness, hot and cold, expansion and contraction, life and death, matter and dark matter, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. All of these are examples of what we see even in our basic perception. We know what light is only because we know what darkness is. We felt it and we've named it because it's palpable. We know happiness because we know what sadness feels like. We know how good rest feels because we know how strenuous our efforts can be. We know what peace feels like because we know what it's like to fight. So, if we look at polarity deeply, we'll recognize that it's a mechanism the universe uses to make truth more visible to us. It shines a light on the conditions and meaning of life. It serves an important function and will always be there for us to see. But, as true for most things in the universe, polarity becomes detrimental at a certain point, which is when we make it part of our identity. Some people live to be the opposition. Some people live to be the other because their otherness gives them a false sense of importance and specialness. Some people like to be the other so they can project their worldview onto others out of self righteousness. And seemingly, using polarity gives us the benefit of simplicity and belonging, but it's a golden cage. And this is where the mind games begin because we can call it mind control however you want to frame it, it's all the same, especially today in politics. Just think about how many people, out of a sense of self righteousness, once again, might say that they are the good ones and that they are the problem, or this mentality that if you don't bow down and accept the doctrines and ideals of a specific group or party, then you're against them, or maybe even a danger to society. Now, this state of mind on a societal level serves to crush the middle. People who move and think with nuance often feel silenced because they are afraid of being seen as an enabler or wishy washy. But we need more nuanced thinkers in the world, more of those who can take a bird's eye view of the world and its events and see all aspects of it, not just one or two. People who can not only see, but also understand the complexity in the world. As we see the growth of tribes in our society, we should be mindful of the dark side of this. At a certain threshold, belonging becomes more important than the truth, and we become programmed and controlled like puppets. I think many people subconsciously would rather be wrong with other people rather than right and alone. And it's an interesting dichotomy. I get it because we all want to feel accepted and heard, but it's fair to ask if this comes at the cost of our own individuality and reason. This need to feel belonging is paradoxically the reason why division is such an effective form of control. We become more connected, yet more divided at the same time. The more we strive to belong, the more we might distance ourselves from others. It's important to mention that our ability to recognize opposites is natural because it's striking, but our current tendency to split reality into opposites is trained. Now I'm going to provide some examples of what we are currently seeing. So, the first example is all too familiar and it's called identity politics. It's one thing to have specific political views, and it's another thing to become so embedded in those views that you couldn't detach from them to hear another person's viewpoint. Once a political view is part of one's identity, any opposition or challenge becomes a real threat, and this is why it has become increasingly difficult to bring politics up with strangers because we feel like we have to walk on eggshells to prevent from offending people with our stance. But might we think that there's power in respectful discourse, power in being challenged, power in changing our minds, power in listening to others? But right now, policy debates are often, or aren't often, I should say, about a difference in ideologies, but a difference in worldview, which is many rungs up and presents the other as dangerous. So let's make sure that what we call propaganda isn't being labeled as such just because it comes from the opposition. We have to be careful about the labels we throw around because the last thing we need is a society with lost labels of significance. And just as much, let's make sure that we aren't automatically saying something is true because it makes our side of the coin look good. Just remember that certainty is easy to sell, but hardly ever the reality of the situation. I won't be that person who says men and women are at war with each other. I think that's a bit extreme and over exaggerated, but I do think it's clear to see that there are power games built into the structure of dating and romance. Because man and woman fail to understand the other truthfully, we project what we want to believe onto others. And when a behavior matches that worldview we have, we say, well, if it ain't so. The mechanism is the same here. In this case, polarity is trying to make up for our lack of comprehension in the realm of complexity. When guys say all girls are the same, that is a declarative and narrow way of thinking, and a cover up for his inability to read women. When women say all men are trash, they are not taking responsibility for their actions in the downfall of their previous relationships. Men have to be bad so she can sideskirt accountability. When we date and attribute high or low value based on what we see, we are creating polarity with labels and not seeing the person in front of us as they are. And labels create truth, sure, but remember, truth is relative. So when we say someone is strictly submissive or dominant in romance, we might be failing to see the opposite in them. And suddenly, two people who want love are showing up like opposing teams in the Super Bowl, ready to box it out. Healthy polarity can be considered as a dance instead of a fight, because when it turns into a war, both sides lose simultaneously. The algorithm loves extremes. The algorithms we inhabit don't always reward nuance, and I think that is clear as day. Tweets are often very definitive, very emotional, and polarized. A nuanced tweet might make the audience think just a little too much, spurring introspection and thought. But extremes are loud, noticeable, and easy to latch onto. We may ask why the news always pushes negative stories, but the answer is simple because we keep watching it. If we didn't gravitate towards this type of news, they wouldn't show it all the time. Everything is made in relation to human nature. Everything is hacked for human attention. There is a lot of energy behind outrage, and that can lead to a click. We share content because we want belonging. We comment because we are competitive. The point is that opposition and danger are easy to sell because the human brain is wired to recognize it. The whole aim of the human body is to survive as long as possible. Some people stay away from social media discourse, in which case they are choosing to flee. Many people stay involved in the discourse, in which case they are choosing to fight. This is the digital version of fight or flight. It's the digital version of surviving one's environment. And this is not to say that all of social media is negative or oppositional, right? You can find motivation, cuddly animal videos, and sports on there, but it's important to also understand how you're feeding the algorithm, even just by looking at something for a certain amount of time. Say, for example, you look at and like a post that is responding to a tragedy. Well, guess what? You'll continue to be in the know about future tragedies and the correspondent outrage. When you engage, you enter the loop. And once you enter the loop, polarization appears. And related to everything we've talked about is the morality split, which is good or bad. These are labels we attach to outcomes in the world. But growing up is realizing that most human behavior and most happenings in the world are not good or evil. It's really people acting in specific ways in response to life, or it's the universe playing out exactly like it should be because it's playing out that way. Only we can attach meaning in our subsequent actions. So, polarity not only exists in the way that we label things, it also exists in the choices that we make about life. Whenever we feel pain, we can have healthy and unhealthy ways of coping. We can lash out and be a detriment to others, or we can use our pain to improve ourselves. When we feel fear, we can walk through that fear with faith in ourselves, or we can isolate ourselves as a form of protection. We can love other people and try to do right by others despite our needs, or we can pursue our ends to any end necessary, undermining what the other people or other person might need and want for themselves. We can learn about our trauma and use it to inform the ways we think and act in the world with others, or we can use it as an excuse to defend ourselves from closeness and understanding with other people. It's better, but admittedly harder, to truly understand others and what they are trying to communicate at any given moment. The examples I just provided are roadmaps you can use to understand people better. If you always take what's on the surface, you could never understand reality. We are always told what's good and bad on the surface, but in this case, who has the control? If we always take that information at face value, life becomes more understandable when we read beyond the cover. The last example is self improvement, which can serve as a mirror for all the things we aren't doing at the moment. This causes polarity to become a weapon that we use against ourselves in our own minds. We think about the version of ourselves that's focused, disciplined, and winning in life and contrast it with the version of us that shows itself on a random Wednesday when we're tired, emotional, and inconsistent with our goals. It's easy to shame one side of the coin without realizing that both are part of you and serve healthy functions if you let them. Think about it. Whenever someone grinds really hard against their own nature for a week, and then they crash really hard for a week, further talking down to themselves because of the crash, they fail to realize the issue. Usually, we'll try to force discipline again, and the same cycle plays out. If only we realize that hard work is sustainable only because we allow ourselves to play, explore, and rest. Life is about balance, and the universe will always find it, sometimes for you. This is why many hardcore workaholics are brought down to earth by health problems. They worked hard, made a lot of money, but maybe they neglected their fitness and mental health, and eventually it catches up to them. They weren't honoring the polarity of success, they weren't honoring the great balance. Another example of polarity and self improvement is when we become so obsessed with self improvement and the frameworks that we hear to the point where we stop listening to ourselves. We might fail to actually integrate the words we are hearing. We might use self improvement as a crutch, as another addiction to satiate our appetite for meaning. It's like that person who spends all of their time reading books, which, of course, on the surface is a very healthy habit. Although, if it comes at the expense of socialization, then what one knows is mostly rooted in abstract knowledge and is not yet integrated. Understanding the polarities of life allows you to integrate both sides and stay balanced in the middle. Polar opposites aren't enemies. So, what is the great balance? Well, it's realizing that polar opposites are not separate entities, but are one and the same as viewed as part of reality. Opposites often depend on each other for existence, even if it's just to exist as a concept. Light doesn't exist without the concept of dark. Strength doesn't exist without the concept of weakness. Courage doesn't exist without fear. Even male and female energies, whether you want to think about them biologically, psychologically, or symbolically, are interdependent and interrelated. Even though we say one initiates and one receives, or one directs and one nurtures, both sides can be overtaken by the other, meaning light can become dark and dark can become light. A nurturer can be direct and a natural leader can follow. The truth is that we have many different traits within us that express themselves in different situations. Everyone can be tender and firm. Women can be soft and relentless at the same time. Men can be ambitious and still at peace. So, the healthy maturation of this topic is integration because when opposites integrate, something stronger forms as a result. It becomes its own complex entity that has a new level of power and influence, and it's called range. It's called embodiment. Integration is strength. The power is in integration, and once we realize that the balance of life is about melding the opposites of life together, we can experience a greater unity with the universe. And also, a greater coherence can follow in all endeavors. Integration is finding the truth and embodying it within and without. And truth incorporates all elements of life, no matter where something falls on a spectrum. If we look at things deeply, we can see integration as having three elements: inside the individual, between individuals, and within society. Embracing polarity and promoting integration allows maturity to flow in. For example, we often try to logic our way out of the feelings and emotions we feel around having to work. We either develop an attitude that employs no excuses and we tell ourselves to just grind harder because there's no time to waste, or we develop an attitude of inability, meaning we might feel overwhelmed by responsibility and duty, which renders us incapable of taking action. Now, an integrated individual might tell themselves that they will show up because they want to treat themselves like someone worth showing up for. It's about the growth and pride we experience in showing up to the arena. But showing up is harder when we don't acknowledge and listen to the parts of us that don't want to. It's like a child you choose to ignore. The child doesn't get quieter, it gets louder and maybe even more destructive. So the point is, don't ignore parts of yourself. Ignoring parts of yourself would mean that you identify only with your lightness and not your darkness, and vice versa. We might act like we don't get jealous, angry, petty, selfish, arrogant, and aloof. We might pretend we have everything all buttoned up, but the shadow doesn't disappear as we move, it follows. You have both light and dark within you, and both can be wielded for positive action. If we only identify with light, we become performative. If we only identify with darkness, we become jaded. Integration is when we can say that we feel love and fear at the same time, generosity and selfishness at the same time. And knowing that as much as some of us might feel the great energy level of courage, there's a part of us that might want to hide. Growth comes from illumination, and illumination reveals us in our entirety. And once we know all aspects of ourselves, we can actually start the journey of becoming truly whole, not just an abstraction or an image. You often hear that knowing is the first step, and that is very accurate. You can't change something you don't know about, which is why self growth is often comparable to peeling back the layers of an onion, because once you remove one layer, you find another one to peel off. Between people, integration creates better relationships. Speaking about integration between people, there are many ways to look at it. But the main aspect is that once you accept the polarity within yourself, you can accept the polarities within other people. This is a path towards acceptance. Now, some people will listen and absorb content from others without expression, while others will set boundaries with the world and become a stonewall. Integration is allowing oneself to care about the experiences of others and still validate your own despite what you hear. In relationships, people often, without knowing, get into them and cause dysfunction because of their subconscious reasoning for seeking it out in the first place. Many people need a relationship to feel okay, which might cover for an inability to be free on their own. Others have this heightened sense of independence that actually covers up a need for deeper connection. In this case, integration is embodying and having and knowing you have wholeness in yourself and choosing closeness with another person from that coherence you feel. There's more to give and less attachment involved in this case, which makes for a lighter relationship. In society, integration creates peace without passivity. And of course, society is built on relationships of all kinds. This is the part that matters the most right now, because we often run into trouble when we lack an understanding of ourselves and other people. That lack of understanding typically involves some sort of projection. But the fact of the matter is that we are all human. We are all much more alike than different from each other, and we all want the same things. But we confuse uniqueness with difference because we might pursue the same outcomes through different means. We all desire and pursue safety, freedom, dignity, opportunity, and a coherent future. Yet the way we talk, express, challenge, and relate to each other takes on unique flavors depending on the source. But if we are integrated, we can be neutral and nuanced from a place of strength. Part of this is understanding that some critiques are actually valid and that's okay, and other critiques are meant to provoke. Now, some traditions, for example, protect society and keep us from spiraling into degeneracy, while other traditions are a stretch in modern times and serve as an intellectual prison. Often baked into traditions is the fear of change, but change is necessary and maybe the most constant element of the universe because everything is always in motion. So, change is often necessary for the proper evolution of our thoughts, ideas, and systems. But of course, sometimes change can also be reckless if it's not the proper time to do so. Ultimately, truth and integration comes from being able to hold complexity and nuance, which is what the world actually is. If you employ this type of mindset, you'll be hard to fool. You'll be even harder to control. And control comes from mind games. Ultimately, I think you understand where I'm coming from and, the point I'm trying to get across. is that there's a reason why integration feels more difficult than choosing a side. You have to be able to voice that you don't know everything, that there's truth on all parts of the spectrum, and that there are multiple realities told from a different frame. So find truth in black and white, find truth in yin and yang, find truth in Republican and Democratic ideologies, acknowledge both your conscious mind and your subconscious mind, and understand the beauty of life and death. We gain true freedom when we do. Freedom isn't picking the right side. Freedom is being too whole to be recruited by one. If you're down, I'd actually love your perspective on this. Comment, where do you see polarity turning into division in your own life? Do you see this in politics, relationships, self talk, and the internet? And where have you seen integration create something stronger? Thank you for joining me for this letter on polarity. There's more where that came from. And I hope you drew something or maybe a few things that you can think about in your own life and that you can start to apply, and just be more mindful about how you see the world. Thank you.